Lisa Seacat DeLuca. And the topic of innovation and creativity is an especially important topic. I'm an economist, and I know that without innovation, without creativity, there really wouldn't be the kind of economic growth and job development that's absolutely essential for all of us. Lisa is a technology strategist for IBM Commerce. Her first idea was in second grade, what was a new type of umbrella. I have to say I was not that forward thinking in second grade, but she certainly got an early start. She was named one of MIT's 2015 35 Innovators Under 35 and one of the Fast Company's 100 most creative people in business. Lisa was also named the 2015 Working Mother of the Year, and in 2014 was named one of the Network World's 50 most fascinating people in the world of technology. As a TED speaker, Lisa is the most prolific female inventor in IBM history, and at only 32 years old, is one of the youngest inventors at IBM to ever reach the 100th Invention Plateau Award. 32 years and that productive. Now, I have to put it in a context. I've been at Hofstra for 46 years, and I'm not sure I have anything like that as a record. Lisa's innovation portfolio includes over 380 patent applications filed within the United States and abroad, of which more than 180 have been granted to date. The subjects of her patent ideas include cloud, mobile, Internet of Things, social, security, and everything in between. It is an honor for me to introduce Lisa Seacat DeLuca. Please give her a round of applause.
All right. Let me see if I can take this. Okay, first person to get in the front row gets one of my books. Go. All right, you both get one. Yay! Thank you. Is that better? Yeah. All right, perfect. All right, so I grew up in Montana, and being a kid in Montana taught me how to think creatively. Now that I'm a parent, looking back, I think that Montana is the best place to raise children. And I think it's because there isn't much trouble that we could get into. So that meant that my brother and sister and I had to make our own trouble. So we were always, playing with dirt and getting our hands dirty. And that's kind of my way of thinking even now. I'm not very good at listening to lectures or reading textbooks. I'm more hands-on. So I like to play with things and see how it works for myself rather than someone else telling me how it works. But this is usually the point in most people's stories where they tell you, especially when they're a software engineer, they say, I started coding when I was 5 years old. And that really isn't the case with me. I was always around computers. My parents had computers. But for me, it was mostly like a giant paperweight. I had to fight my dad to get time on the computer. But when I did get time on the computer, it was mostly for word processing. So I loved to type on the computer, and I love the feel of the keys under my fingers. My sister and I used to write stories and play make-believe, and we'd make our characters be like our stuffed animals. And we'd have them, run these adventures, and then we'd print out the stories, and I'd give the script to my sister, and we'd kind of hide behind a curtain and do puppet shows with our family camcorder. But that's kind of how I got started with computers, is doing typing. It wasn't until a little bit later, when my brother convinced my parents to buy a Nintendo, that I really started understanding a little bit more about software and how it works. I didn't know what software engineering was, but I knew that it was really cool when I hit a button and the character would jump or run faster or duck behind something. And that really got me excited about the possibility of telling computers what to do. A little bit after this, so I played a lot of Nintendo with my brother. It was about third grade, and my dad said, Lisa, if you're a valedictorian, I will buy you a red Ford Mustang convertible. And I'm in third grade, so I'm like, yeah, I want a red Ford Mustang convertible. And I knew even when I was younger that meant that, he didn't really think I was going to be valedictorian. He wasn't really going to give me a brand new car. But this goes back to my way of thinking. If someone tells me I'm not going to be able to do something, I'm going to prove them wrong. So I, study hard. A lot of things came easily, but some things were a little tougher. So I worked harder in those subjects. But I was like, I'm going to be valedictorian. And then high school happened, and I fell in love. My high school boyfriend and I were inseparable. We spent so much time together. It was a miracle that, I had good grades at all. But we used to, after school, I'd run and hang out with him all the time. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I knew I liked playing with the, typing. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a writer or who knows what, but he really liked playing computer games. And it was kind of one of those times in my life where I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with myself? I knew I liked playing sports. I wanted to go to university and play basketball or volleyball. And so we were talking about our future together, and he's like, have you heard of this school called Carnegie Mellon? I'm like, no. And he's like, well, it's the best computer science school in the country. I'm like, okay. He's like, I'm going to apply. And I'm like, okay, I'll apply too. It'll be the one school that we both apply to together. And if we both get in, then we were meant to be together. And so we applied to Carnegie Mellon, and he didn't get in, but I did. So I decided I'm going to go to Carnegie Mellon, and I'm going to go to the computer science department. I graduated, and we packed up the car, and it wasn't the Mustang, even though I was valedictorian. I never saw that Mustang. But we packed up the car and drove to Pittsburgh. Carnegie Mellon was awesome. I loved going to school there, but at first I was kind of, I didn't really identify with the other students very well. I looked around, and it wasn't just that I was a woman in computer science. It was that, I played sports, and I liked to do other things that not everyone else in the class liked to do. And I noticed right away that made me unique. And I kind of attacked problems a little differently than everyone else did. And I wasn't sure if computer science was even the right thing for me because, I liked some of the classes. It wasn't really teaching how to code. It was more the theory and the algorithms and that way of thinking. It wasn't really learning how to code or what real life would be like. But I did some internships, and I started my internships at IBM, and that's when I knew that I wanted to be a computer scientist because of the real-world experience that I was getting. I loved just the idea of doing programming, and during my internships, we met with other IBMers, and we got exposed to people that were high up in IBM that kind of shared how they got to where they were in their careers. And so that really excited me, and I was like, okay, computer science is for me. I'm going to do it. So I, trudged through 4 years of computer science at Carnegie Mellon. I was not valedictorian. I came in with zero computer science background, but I knew I wanted to do it. And it wasn't as much about getting the grades as it was exposing myself and learning a little bit about something that I potentially could have a career out of. So I graduated from Carnegie Mellon. I got a degree in computer science and minors in multimedia productions and business administration. So after graduation, I had a college boyfriend. And we decided, are we going to go live together somewhere, or are we going to go our separate ways? He was a year older than me in college, and he was living in D.C. And so we decided, okay, are we going to move together or go our separate ways? And I went my separate way. I went to Austin, Texas, which I've been dying to get back there ever since I left. It was amazing, big college town. The food was incredible. There's a million things to do. I just loved it, and I was almost on a high of this is amazing. It's the first time that I'm out on my own. I had money burning holes in my pockets because I'm a software engineer now, and it wasn't just the internship money that you have to stretch out for the whole year. Now you're getting real money for having a career. But something was missing, and I couldn't really put my finger on it, what it was. I was a low man, in the totem pole at IBM, and I was doing everything I was told to at work. I was enjoying what I was doing, but I didn't really have that creative outlet that I used to have growing up and through college. And that's when I noticed in people's offices there were these plaque awards, and they were for patents. So I started asking around about what it took to create a patent. And I found out that it was pretty easy. There was a database that you had to download, and there was 3 different questions, and you could submit ideas through the IBM patent process. So I was like, okay, I can come up with an idea. So I thought a little bit about my day job and thought about the problems that I was having in my day job. And one thing that I thought would be really cool to have was I was programming, right? And I was using an IDE, and I was waiting for different output lines to come up through the console, and I had a hard time seeing when it would scroll by. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if I could code it to like a website where I could change the color or the font size or even add like an animated clip art as it's scrolling through so you could see when your code is being executed. And I was like, okay, this is kind of a cool idea. So I did some research online, tried to see if anyone else had done it before, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I wrote up the patent, and I talked to one of my mentors, and I was like, what do you think of this idea? And he's like, well, why don't you just submit it through the process and see how it goes? So this goes back to me like learning by doing. I'm like, okay. So I hit the button for submit and had to present my idea in front of an invention review board. And they ended up really liking the idea, and it made it all the way through the process. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be an inventor. I got my first invention through. And since then, it was really addicting. I loved the process. It was kind of a way for me to meet with other people around IBM who kind of thought like I did, and they were really creative. They needed this outlet. They wanted to talk about new technologies, and they wanted to find ways to make, like, what's the future look like? What is this technology going to be? What's the limitations of it today, and how can we expand this to be something cooler? And so that's what really got me into inventing. And my first one was successful, but I think my next 10 were failures. But I just loved the entire process. So I was in San Francisco, and that college boyfriend of mine, we were long distance, and we decided, okay, we need to either break up or move to the same city. As much fun as I was having in Austin, I was like, all right, I'm going to take a chance, and we're going to move to the same city. And we're thinking, where should we live in the United States? That would be good for both of us. And he was a scientist, so we're like, okay, San Francisco would be a great place to go. There's a lot of technology there. So we decided, all right, we'll go to San Francisco. And I got there first. I transferred my job within IBM and got there. And you can probably see my office. I think I was right here on the 19th floor. Had a window cube. It was pretty awesome. But nobody was ever there, so I pretty much worked from home, and the cost of living was crazy. So I had to invent more. So I had to make some money to pay for my mortgage. But he ended up moving in, and a few months later, he proposed on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I said yes. And we got married in Montana about a year later. There's my Mustang, only for pictures, and then I had to drive away. But it was awesome. And he was getting his PhD in San Francisco, so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I was spending a lot of time patenting and coming up with ideas, and I just loved the process. But while I was in San Francisco, I met a lot of really cool people that were just inspired. They were starting their own businesses or working at startups. And I thought, I want to start my own business. I was like, what kind of idea could I come up with? I have all these patent ideas I'm submitting through IBM. There's got to be one or two that I can go out and do my own thing with. So one day I was at a San Francisco Giants game, and my friend from Austin actually came into town with her husband, and he's the kind of guy that like goes to all the stadiums around the whole country, and he just wants to experience all the stadiums. And so when we were there, they got like awesome seats down here, and I'm like up here in the nosebleeds. We're texting. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sneak down, and I'm gonna sit next to you. And I couldn't get by the bouncer in a few places, so we're going around. But eventually, I got down to where they were seated, and I was like, okay, wouldn't that be really cool if you could buy a ticket to a game and have, pay proportionally for how long you sit in different seats. So you could sit behind home plate, and maybe it's a $300 ticket, but you're only there for 3 innings, so you only pay $100. And then, you could sit out in the nosebleeds. And that way you can experience the whole stadium, and the people around you kind of change, and you're paying for that ticket before the start of the event. So you have one paper ticket. And I did some research, and I couldn't find anyone who had done it. There was a lot of stuff about upgrading your seat, but I didn't really see anything about like downgrading your seat or having this ticket before the start of the event. So I thought, okay, I can write my own patent. I'd seen hundreds of them through the ones that I'd done through IBM, so why do I have to pay a patent lawyer thousands of dollars to do it. I should be able to do this myself. So I wrote up the idea. I wrote the claims. I made the pretty figures in PowerPoint, and I submitted it through the process. And does anyone have a patent? No? Okay, well, it takes forever. So once you submit the idea, it takes about 3 to 5 years for it to go through the whole process. So while I'm waiting for this patent to come through, I created my own website. I'm a software engineer. I can do that myself, right? So I built this website, and it's like, if you build it, they will come. Well, they never came. Like, why aren't people finding my website? And so I'm like, I need to do something. I need to learn a little bit more about starting your own business. So while I was working at IBM, I decided to go back and get my master's. And I wasn't sure if I should do an MBA, but I found this program at the University of Texas called a Masters of Science in Technology Commercialization. So it's kind of like how to start your own business. It did talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. You learned about products and how to, almost like vet the market and talk to people about your idea. I learned a lot about LinkedIn and how don't be afraid to just find someone randomly on LinkedIn and send them a message. I talked to all the top sales guys from a bunch of the sports venues about my idea, and they were all happy to talk to someone from a university. So I started, I convinced my team that this idea that I came up with was amazing, and so we did a business plan around it. We did all of the stuff around like doing the research to figure out if this should be a business. And we ended up winning a competition for our class and got like an A in the class for winning this thing. But a lot of the research that I found out when I was talking to the teams was everyone loved it. They loved this idea of having this ticket that could allow people to experience different seats. They thought it was good for people who weren't sure what area they wanted to buy season tickets in, so they could experience a little bit and then pick the seat that they wanted. But nobody wanted to be first. It seemed like it was almost like everyone was set in their ways with the sports venues, and no one really wanted to try this new thing, especially from this young girl who knows her background. So that it didn't really go anywhere very fast. But I graduated, and things kind of were getting crazy with my personal life. Like my husband, he was finishing up his PhD, so we had to move somewhere. And so we ended up moving to Baltimore. And he's at Hopkins right now, and that's where we are right now. But about a month after we moved to Baltimore, we had our sons, Anthony and Nathan. So, things were definitely busy. Not so much the starting my own business type of free time that I had previously. So I spent a lot of time with them, took some maternity leave, just absolutely loved being a parent. And then I reached my 100th plateau. So 100th plateau in IBM, each plateau is about 4 patents. So like right now I have 420 or so patents that I've filed through the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and 250 or so have issued to date. But I was like, okay, when I get to the 100th plateau, that was my goal. Once I got there, I thought, the fireworks would go off and balloons would fall from the ceiling and confetti, and people would be like, yeah, Lisa. But that didn't happen. I was like, why not? So I started doing some research, and I asked around, and I said, is there any other women that have reached the 100th plateau? And they did some research. They talked to IP law and HR, and sure enough, no one had ever reached the 100th plateau as a woman. In fact, there's only been 14 IBMers ever to get to the 100th plateau in the history of IBM. So I was excited. They did a couple articles about me. I got to have a film crew come out to my house and do a day in the life and kind of talk about inventing and show my kids, because they love the spin on working mom kind of thing. And it was really fun. And while I decided, now I'm going to write a kid's book. I've always been someone who likes to do the hobbies outside of work. And for me, I'd always wanted to write a book. Going back to when I was a kid writing the plays, I thought it'd be really fun to do a kid's book, and why not do it myself? So I found this illustrator in Latvia, and he helped illustrate everything, and I just wrote the story. And it's about a mom who teaches her fraternal twin boys how to count to 10 in binary. So I ran a Kickstarter. I always wanted to learn about crowdfunding, and what better way than to fund my book. So it was successful. I raised about $14,000, and it was a really fun experience learning how to get the books printed overseas in China and deal with importing. And distributing the books out to people. I just had a lot of fun with that whole project. And people at IBM kind of noticed it, and they thought, oh, that's really cool. This person is, sharing what she loves with people. And so they asked me to speak at the first ever TED at IBM event. And I was like, oh no, they asked me. I'm like, I don't want to say yes, because here's little me when I was little, hiding behind a curtain doing puppet shows because I wasn't sure about talking in front of people. But it was probably the single best thing I ever did for my career. And when I was doing it, this guy who trains people about speaking, he said that if you ask a man to do a TED Talk, 9 out of 10 say yes. But if you ask a woman, 9 out of 10 say no. And that was really powerful for me because it's like, why not, put yourself out there and try something new, even if it's a little scary. And for me, it really paid off because I got lots of great press after that, and my career kind of went fun, like crazy fun. For the first time ever, I was asked to move to a new group within IBM. Otherwise, I had kind of said, I want to work on cloud or I want to work on mobile, and I'd push myself into different groups that worked on those things. But after the talk, I made friends with a VP in Commerce, and he's like, come work for me. Come work for my team. I think you do great things. So I said yes, and this is where I currently am. I'm a part of our IBM Commerce division. I'm a technology strategist, which means I get to help come up with design new solutions around technology and how to take different IBM products and integrate them together. So this one in particular is kind of fun. It's a project I'm just now finishing up on. But the idea is there's beacons, like Bluetooth low energy beacons inside venues. And when you download a mobile application for a company, let's say it's Macy's, as you're walking around in the venue, you can get push notifications. The venue could understand a little bit about where you are, what departments you visit, and push you offers. So this is what I got to work on, was a proof of concept showing how you can push this information to clients. I'll get some water real quick. I work from home. I don't normally talk this much. Okay, so this is what I'm working on now. But I'm being pushed now into an area where we're talking about cognitive computing. So it's like machine learning and understanding computers can learn as people change, as the information around them changes, they can do really neat things. So I can't tell you exactly what I'm doing, but it's in that space and it's really fun. And then about, I'd say a month into starting my new job, I had to tell my manager that I was pregnant again. So I have my second set of twins, twin girls. They are 7 months old, so I don't have much free time anymore. But it's crazy fun being a working mom. I get to work at home, and my girls are there, so I'm able to be with them and spend time with them. So things have been really busy. I haven't quite started my business that I wanted to start yet, but I will. And so I decided I had to write another book, right? So I just had another set of twins, so I have to write another book. So this is the one I'm currently working on, which I'm calling the Internet of Mysterious Things. And the idea is that we're all looking at our smartphones, down on our tablets and devices all the time, that we're missing out on life around us. So the story isn't as nerdy as counting 10 binary, but it's got a little technical flair to it. And the idea is you press a button to turn on a light, and and it's really like a leprechaun that runs across the room and turns on the light. So the moral of the story is look up from your devices because you're missing out on life around you. So I'm working with a new illustrator on that, and it's kind of a fun side project I'm working on. Another fun one that I'm doing right now, kind of inspired by my kids. So there's one spot in the kitchen that kids can play in, and that's the Tupperware drawer. But it's really boring. There's not much you can do with the Tupperware. You can stack things a little bit. But I thought it'd be really fun to add wheels to the lid of your Tupperware so that you can drive them around. And so I got another illustrator. He drew some cool cars. I got a school bus and a fire truck and a garbage truck. And I thought it'd be really fun to make a physical product that I could sell to people. And of course, I'll have to do a Kickstarter on it. But I wasn't sure how to go about prototyping something, because you can come up with ideas all you want, but how do you make it? How do you make it real? And I had a friend that I played volleyball with in college, and she's a professor at the University of Delaware. And she kept talking about prototyping and all of the things that she was doing on Facebook. And so I reached out to her and I said, can you make a prototype for me? And she wrote back and she said, well, I have a friend who's also a professor at the University of Delaware who's doing a toy design class. So she actually paired me up with this professor, and I pitched them this idea. And the students, the honors class, are in groups of 4, and they're working to come up with my prototype. So I don't have to pay anything. They're like doing this for me, which is pretty cool. So this is one of their designs, and in a couple of weeks they're going to send me the physical prototype to check out, and then I award one of the teams the prize of winning, and then I'll go through the whole process of finding someone to do the prototype overseas and play around with it and get it perfect before I do a Kickstarter again. So definitely stay in touch with all the people around you. Look around, be friends with people on LinkedIn. You never know when your paths will cross again in the future, and you can, get each other to help each other out with prototypes. So I wanted to give you some ideas of some of my patents. A lot of them are very low-level programming, cloud computing, hard to talk about with people outside of work. But I have a few that you could probably relate to. So I figured I'd share some stories. And this one, you can look them all up. They've all been granted. But this one is called Generating Routes. And I thought of this one, it was right after New Year's. And I felt like I need to get in shape, right? Everyone feels like that after New Year's. And so I was like, okay, I have an hour for lunch. I'm just going to go for a 1-mile run around my apartment in San Francisco. And I was like, okay, so what's a mile in city blocks? I don't know. I'm not going to just run for a mile and then stop. I still have to get home. So I thought it'd be really fun to do something where I'd start and stop at my apartment. And so I went on my favorite mapping software, and I started dragging the routes around to try to get it to a mile. And I add a block here, subtract a block here, trying to get around to 1 mile. And it was really painful. It probably took me the whole lunch hour just trying to map out my 1 mile thing. So I was like, okay, maybe this is patentable. So I did some other research. I looked through the patents to see if it existed, and I didn't see it anywhere. So I submitted this idea, and the idea is exactly that. So taking a starting and ending point and generating a route that's a circle, back to your original spot, going by maybe certain points of interest. So going by a park or going by a coffee shop, and saying, maybe I want to do a run. I want to go out for an hour, or I want to go for a certain distance. And what comes back to you is a list of available routes, and you can pick which one's your favorite and go for a run. So that's that idea. And then once you're back at your house, right, most people have a Wi-Fi network that has a lot of characters, or you forget what your password is because it's automatically programmed into all your devices. So the idea behind this invention was to allow people onto your Wi-Fi network based on your degree of social network friendship. So if you have a friend that you talk to every day, that you're a first-degree friend, you'll let them on your Wi-Fi network. Whereas if someone comes into your house that you're not even friends with, you might not let them automatically onto your account. So they wouldn't have to enter a password. It would be more like a handshake communication through social media. This one's a fun one. So once you start in the corporate world, you have a lot of phone calls, a lot of conference calls, and every time, it's really kind of funny, because every time someone joins a call, they'll be like, hello, who just joined? You have to announce your name. It's really painful. I was like, this would be really fun if every time someone joined, they had a unique ringtone or song that played. So every time I joined, it would have a certain song, and every time someone else joined, it would have a certain song. So you wouldn't have to ask who it was. You just kind of, after a while, learn what their tone was or their special song, and that way you'd know who it was. So that was kind of fun. So about, I'd say, a year and a half into IBM, I went out to a conference in Chicago with another coworker, and her parents were based in the Chicago area, and so we were trying to meet up with them for dinner. And we were going to a restaurant that was like a chain restaurant. And so there were a bunch of different locations for that restaurant. And we were just having a really hard time finding each other. So I thought, wouldn't it be really cool if I could provide turn-by-turn directions to a moving vehicle? And so rather than they get the directions to the actual store or actual restaurant, they're getting directions to our car in such a way that you could know, based on my speed, a way of meeting up with me because I'm eventually going to cross some intersection. So this idea is really cool because it provides directions to that moving vehicle. Okay, and the last example I had, my husband hates this one, but the idea is there's a lot of trucks that have advertisements on the outside, right? You see a Coke truck, and it's probably got Coke on the inside. But it'd be really neat if you could change the advertisement based on what was inside the truck. And so you could use different technologies like RFID. RFID tags are getting cheap enough to where it'd be pretty easy to put that on a pallet of whatever it is that's being loaded into this vehicle. And you could imagine, maybe you'd swap out all the Coke and throw in some Pepsi, and then all of a sudden the advertisement changes completely to be a Pepsi advertisement because that's what's inside. And you could also do it based on a percentage. So if you had, a quarter of the truck was Coke and 3/4 was Diet Coke, you could have a quarter of the time it'd be a Coke ad, and 3/4 of the time it'd be a Diet Coke ad. So that was kind of a fun one. And that's really all I had as far as the ideas. As far as my idea for the future, I mean, you can watch my TED Talk. I talked a little bit about what I thought the future would be like. But as you can see, a lot of my inventions are just building off of existing technologies, slight differences of what exists today. And I think that 99.99% of inventions are exactly that. They're building off of what exists. I would say the things that come out of nowhere are more discoveries than inventions. But it's super fun, and once you get in that mindset of inventing, you start seeing problems, and it becomes an opportunity for a solution as opposed to just being stuck on what the problem is. So if anyone has any questions.
You said after your first patent, you had about 10 in a row that failed. I know lots of people would say I learned more from my failures. So can you tell us anything you learned from those 10 unsuccessful experiences?
Yep, yeah. So the ones that were unsuccessful, it was mostly me being naive and not really understanding what the patent process was like at IBM. I learned that ideas that I came up with, because I'm inventing in a corporate space, needed to have an IBM value to them. So, a lot of these ones that I showed you as examples might not necessarily have an IBM value to them because it's not an IBM core product. But, I was coming up with things around GPS and mobile, the things that I could relate to and talk to and I knew problems about. So it was easier to invent in. And those spaces also tended to be more crowded. So there was a lot of prior art. And I didn't understand at the beginning how to search for things to see whether or not they existed. So over time, I've gotten really good at finding the prior art and differentiating my ideas. A lot of times I'll come with an idea and I'll do some prior art searching and I'll find my idea. And now, before I used to be like, oh no, someone already did my idea. But now it kind of gets me excited. It's like a challenge. Like someone's saying, no, you can't do that idea. And now I'll take my original idea and I'll spin it into a new space or do something different with it to makes it stronger beyond that prior art. And I kind of like that challenge.
So are your patents only, I'm not sure how patents work. Are they only with IBM or worldwide patents? I don't know. Does that make sense? My question makes sense.
I can answer it. So the patents are worldwide. So I'm an inventor. I mean, if I leave IBM, I'm still considered an inventor. But the rights to the patents that I do at IBM are IBM's rights. So it depends on where you're at. I know a lot of universities, as an inventor, you get some of the royalties if you were to make a lot of money. We get paid for all of our patents as we submit it. So it's kind of an incentive to do inventing. But that being said, I submitted 2 myself outside of IBM. And the 2 ideas were the ones I showed you. So the one with the ticketing startup, that idea is now granted and it's issued. So if anyone wants to start a business with me, I got a patent on it. So that one was the one that I did and I wrote to myself. And then the other patent that I've submitted is that container idea. So the wheels on the top. Mm-hmm.
all the patents that you have submitted aren't necessarily like being put out to use yet?
So a lot of them are. So I like to invent around my day job. So I'll come up with ideas like I showed you the commerce idea. I've submitted about 25 ideas related to that space of understanding where people are and how they move about in a venue and doing some really cool things with like grouping and in that space, which won't be public it takes 18 months for an idea to become public. So a lot of those will go into our products. But some of them, you never know. Like a lot of the ones I gave examples, like the truck changing advertisements, who knows if that'll ever go into use.
Kind of just a general question. You said you have over 400 patents. I just wanted to know if there was one you're like most particularly proud of.
Definitely my first patent ever that I talked about with the IDE and the, being able to style the output console. That was one that I'm really excited about because it was me taking that step of challenging myself to say I can do this and submit a patent and go through the process. I try not to get too attached to ideas just because it's kind of like being too attached to, if someone calls your baby ugly, you're like, oh no, life's over. So the same thing with inventing, you won't want to be too attached because if someone doesn't like it, you won't be encouraged to go on to the next thing. So if I do ever start my own business, I'll probably be kind of like that, like a serial inventor or a serial startup person. I'll probably do a bunch of different ideas.
How do you come up with all of these ideas? Is there a technique or a question that you ask yourself?
Yeah, so, they're not alone. We invent in groups. I like to find other IBMers that have similar way of thinking or passions or different spaces. So there's some people I invent with that we'd like to talk about cloud computing, other that are commerce related. My group now, we're working on a really cool solution with cognitive, like I said, and we have a group of like 4 of us that like to come up with ideas together. I think that's the best way, especially being prolific. If you get a bunch of people on board, then it doesn't take as long to do ideas. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm curious on what made you stay in IBM for so long?
Yeah, why am I at IBM? I love IBM. I don't know. Like, I work from home. I have a family. I get to spend time with my kids. I work, they're very flexible. If I have to go and run my kids to do something, as long as I'm getting my work done, they're great. I don't have to be in an office, which at the same time, I kind of miss having coworkers. And that's part of the reason that got me into inventing is because I could reach out to people and kind of have that social time where we talk about new ideas. I always say that I'll stay with IBM until I start my own business. And it's probably true just because I've been so happy. I love it. They treat me really well. And I love it.
At least 3 times in your talk, you mentioned having work done overseas. First was for the illustrator, to have the book published, and I guess for the prototype.
Yep.
For the illustrator, how did you get that illustrator? And for the others, is it that much cheaper to have it done overseas to publish and to prototype?
Yep. So my illustrator, it was kind of funny because if you couldn't tell, I like to do everything myself. It's really hard for me to delegate and to ask someone else to do something because I'm so, I can do this better than everyone else. But when it came to my book, I was like, I can find some robot illustrations and move the arms a little bit. And I have pretty good skills with Illustrator and Photoshop. I thought I could just do it myself. And I found online, I did a stock photo search for some robots, and I found this one that was really cool. Like the robot was perfect, and I downloaded it. I paid the fee, I downloaded it, and I tried to move the arms a little bit, and I just did not have those skills. I thought for sure I could write my own book and do the own illustrations, and it just I had to. I didn't think anyone would buy my book if I actually did it myself. So I found the contact information from the stock site on the guy. I saw his name and I put it into Google and found some account that he did and actually found him on Facebook. And so I sent him a message on Facebook and I said, hey, I'm writing a kid's book. Do you want to be my illustrator? And he's like, sure. And so that's how we connected, and we just did all of our communications over email, and I was super happy with him. He was a student and just excited about the process. I sent him all these books afterwards, and he just loved the whole process. And then you asked about the cost. So I started researching when I was going to do my book how much it would cost to do it in the United States versus in another country. And I went through like Alibaba and typed in what my requirements were for doing a book, and it wasn't very expensive. I think the one I ended up going with, it was about $2 a book, and I got about 2,000 books. So the more you buy, of course, the price goes down. But when I was looking at that same book in the United States, it would cost over $8.50 a book, which, right now, by the time I sell my book, I'm still selling them on Amazon. If I do it prime shipping, I only get about $6 a book. So I would be taking a loss if I had printed it in the United States. But my illustrator for the second book, actually, my sister, I encouraged her to write a book, and she wrote a really cute kids book about even superheroes have to sleep. And she found an illustrator in the United States, and we started talking, and he's way more expensive than my Latvia illustrator, but he's really good, and I'm excited about working with him.
Hi. As an inventor who's involved with a lot of computer science, I'm assuming you use a lot of C++. You do not?
So,
Can I still ask about like programming languages in general?
sure.
What is your like personal opinion on like the universal like coding language, and like where do you think it's gonna go in like a decade?
I think that's one of my favorite things about being a software engineer is it changes so much, and it's also one of the things I hate the most because I want to know everything, and it's hard to be an expert on every single programming language because there's a million of them. Every single day it seems like there's some new programming language that's coming up. But if I had to give you advice on what programming language to learn, it would be JavaScript for sure, just because it seems like that's kind of where a lot of our industry is going, especially at IBM. We see a lot of people doing like node development, Java on the front end, the back end, server, everything is related to JavaScript. My personal background, I didn't have any programming experience at all until college, and then they didn't really teach us how to program in different languages in college. It was, like I said, more of the theory and algorithms and understanding it. It was like the way of thinking. So I kind of started with Java, and that's how I got into IBM. I did more Java development. I've done open source stuff related to mobile development, and I like doing the JavaScript side of Apache Cordova programming. And now I'm mostly doing JavaScript for all my proof of concepts, creating like node apps and NPM modules and stuff.
What advice can you give on building relationships with people and like getting people to believe in your ideas and putting them on your team? Because I kind of have that same mentality where you feel like you can do everything better than anyone else, but I'm trying to like let that go. So what can you like say as far as like getting people to help you out and want to make your dreams come true?
I think that's one thing over time in my career that I'm not afraid to like ask people for help, and like if I don't know the answer now, I can find somebody who does. It's really easy since IBM's like 400,000 people to find someone who can help me. But like I said, in trying to vet my idea with in my university, I found people on LinkedIn. I searched by job titles, ticketing sales, and I reached out to them and got some time on their calendar and talked to them. And I think that that'd be the best way, is just starting that networking and communicating with people and reaching out. Like, don't be afraid to reach out. I have so many mentors and now mentees at IBM, and nobody's ever came back and said, no, I don't have time to meet with you. Everyone's always has spent some time to get me on their calendar to talk. And the first time you talk to someone, you know immediately whether or not you click and whether you have that, that thing that you like get along and can work together. And so I'd say if you're trying to get people to come into your idea, just talk and share your idea with as many people as possible. Don't worry about someone stealing your idea. It's all about, putting it out there so that you can see if people are even interested in it. and you'll find pretty quickly whether someone else is just as interested in you as you are.
So you mentioned a lot of the reasons why you have stayed with IBM and why you think they're such a great employer. For a lot of the students in the room who may be looking for internships or even full-time positions, it must have been a unique, I don't know, is IBM a unique company with this patent encouragement program they do for inventors and computer scientists, or is this a standard kind of thing you see in the marketplace, something students could be looking for when they're looking for internships and jobs if that's what they want to explore?
Yeah, so IBM's been the leader with the number of issues for patents for 23 years in a row. So I know that we put a lot more emphasis on it than other companies might do with innovation. But now it's kind of shifting. Companies realize that they have to have a patent portfolio. So I know a lot of people who have left IBM to go work for other tech-related companies, and they've been able to continue inventing. So I think you can do it anywhere. There's a lot of people at IBM that don't do it. For me, it's just something that I've really enjoyed, and it's one of the reasons that I stay at IBM.
Please join with me. Thank you very much.